I'd love to talk to you today about Cribl Guard. Hello everyone, my name is Robert Calvert and I'm a member of the Cribl Customer Success Engineering team. In this presentation today, we're going to talk a bit about data oversight and why is that so important in organizations today. We'll be talking a bit about Cribl Guard, what it is and what problems it exists to solve. We'll follow this up by going into a bit more technical detail, looking at how Guard rules work in practice, and some tips and tricks for how to make them work the best for you. When we're talking about Cribl Guard, we're really thinking about data management challenges. Depending on your organization's requirements, you might have different needs to get the right data into the right places at the right time, with a whole host of regulatory requirements as well. Most organizations today have a complicated data architecture. This could be the result of multiple technology stacks, or it could be the result of a merger and acquisition strategy. Additionally, depending on what applications are being run, the data being processed might be changing format and content continuously. An application that was initially created to process non-confidential information might suddenly start ingesting confidential information a few years after development. This continuously evolving data landscape is further complicated by the existence of write-once storage. With write-once storage, if you place sensitive data in this destination, it can be often impossible to correct errors, omissions, or do any redactions once the data gets written. This write-once storage is really valuable when we're considering topics like ransomware or considering things like integrity controls across an organization. But from a sensitivity perspective, we need to be mindful of the complexities that introduces. Additionally, when we're thinking about different security controls, we have to recognize that multiple destination systems may have different security control levels and access rights. So data going into one location might be okay, whereas the exact same data being presented in the same format going to a different location may present problems. Within these technical requirements are a whole host of compliance and regulatory requirements as well. If you look up data protection standards, you'll often hear phrases like this: requirements indicating that organizations must be vigilant against things like accidental loss and introduce appropriate safeguards to prevent against this. This is an extract from some UK guidance, which is based on GDPR. There are lots of variations of this concept stipulating requirements that exist all around the world today. You should consult your compliance and privacy teams for your exact organization's requirements and consider the fact that these might vary depending on what geography you are operating in and where people using your services reside. So after thinking about all of this, let's talk about Cribl Guard and how this helps your organization meet these requirements. So what is Cribl Guard? In a paragraph, Cribl Guard allows you to scan sensitive data streams in real time to identify that sensitive information, apply mitigations critically before the data then leaves Cribl stream and goes to downstream destinations. There are other tools available on the market today that focus on detecting sensitive data at rest. Cribl Guard is a feature that enables you to do that whilst the data is traversing across your Cribl stream deployment. So that's really highlighting the value proposition of real time. I mentioned earlier in this presentation talking about the complexities of write-once storage. This is why it's very important to apply those mitigations before the data leaves Cribl, because remember, once the data gets written in certain downstream destinations, it may be too late. If we think about where Guard operates from an architecture perspective, Guard is most often applied at a post-processing pipeline stage. So you would enable Guard typically to be applied to one or more destinations, often the destinations for which you do not want sensitive data to be transmitted. Because obviously choice is a key Cribl value, you can apply the Guard function elsewhere if you wish. So there could be situations if you want to apply it at the pre-processing pipeline stage, if you're considering redacting information that's coming from one or more specific sources before that information even gets to the routing level. If you go to the Cribl Stream UI today and enable Guard, it will look something like this. You will select Guard from the option that appears on the menu selection and apply it to one or more destinations. In this example that I've shared, so this is after immediately switching Cribl Guard on, we can already see that it's scanning through a series of events traversing through this pipeline and making a few modifications accordingly as well. The redaction and operation is occurring within the Cribl Guard function, and this is now a new function that exists within Cribl Stream. This function can be modified, tuned, adjusted, like all of the other functions, with things like filters, and again, each of the unique parameters, which we'll go into in a second. The first thing to think about is which rule sets you're applying within your Cribl Guard function. These rule sets are essentially a series of instructions for what types of data to look for. In this example, we're using the default set of rules. We have also chosen to state what we want to replace sensitive data with. In this example, we're using the string redacted, but there are other options which we'll come to shortly. If we want to, we can add additional rule sets. It's sensible to only add rule sets that you believe are relevant to your circumstance, and this will avoid triggering unnecessary false positives. Finally, you can be more specific in where you're choosing the guard function to be applied. So there are certain fields, typically those that are user created, that are more likely to contain sensitive information. Similarly, you can choose to exclude certain fields which you know will never contain sensitive information. An example of this would be, for example, a timestamp field, which is by and large machine generated and unlikely to contain anything like API keys or personally identifiable information. The Cribl Guard rule sets out of the box exist with a very large number of things to get you started. So if you go to the knowledge objects within a specific worker group, you'll be able to see all of the guard rules that are available for your use. You can add additional rules to this if you like. In this example, I'm showing the default rule set, which contains all of the things that we are looking for. So under this example, we're looking to redact things like web tokens, private keys, potentially bank account information as well. Let's look a little closer at how those rules actually work behind the scenes. Rules within Cribl Guard have two key components. They have both a pattern to match and a set of anchor terms. Patterns are the regex that's used to actually match the sensitive data, and the anchor terms are used to improve the accuracy of the data matching. So those always come before the pattern. In this example, I have chosen to use an anchor term for a host. So we're imagining I wish to redact the host names of a system. I've chosen in this example to use the pattern match for a dash character followed by a series of letters and numbers. In this example, which we can see in the preview window, you can also note that it has identified the second instance of a host being referenced. So the anchor host is considered a substring match for Cribl_host, in addition to host just appearing by itself. Depending on your data, this might be desirable or it might not. So you should consider how you're defining your anchor terms to account for this behavior. If you want to get started with regex and you're less familiar with what's available, I'd strongly encourage you to experiment with the Copilot option. This can be used to very quickly build Cribl Guard rules, which is particularly useful if you have a data sample which you can cross-reference and immediately validate the output. To get you started on regex, I'm going to give you a couple of reminder tips. There is a module available on the Cribl University site that goes into more detail about regex. And there are other elements of the Cribl Stream admin course that are very useful here as well. So this is just intended to be a quick refresher. Here is an example of a regular expression. As a human reader looking at this for the first time, it can be quite hard to see what this is attempting to match. So let's start breaking it down into a series of sections. The first part of it is looking for a character in the range A to Z, and this is denoted with the square brackets. The second part of this regular expression is a quantifier. So in this example, we are looking for 5 of the preceding thing. Across each of this, we're again specifying ranges of numbers and letters and the quantities associated with them. And the final part are all of the flags that we're applying. These enable you to modify the behavior of your regex to account for things like line breaks or special characters. For this example, this illustrative string would match this regular expression. And for those that are familiar with what type of data this would be an example of a UK driver's license. If you're not from the UK, this is a quite good example of highlighting the value that Cribl Guard brings to highlighting certain types of data that you may be less accustomed to dealing with. So when we're thinking about regex, having a series of out-of-the-box rules to get you started can be incredibly valuable, particularly for data formats with which you are less familiar. So let's think about best practices. What you should be doing and what you should not be doing with Cribl Guard. The first thing to consider is CPU performance. As Cribl Guard is very focused on using regular expressions and scanning through potentially large volumes of data, this will have a measurable CPU performance impact. You should consider whether or not your worker group is appropriately sized for this, and additionally monitor CPU usage after deploying Guard to ensure that the sizing is appropriate thereafter. The second thing to think about is not writing bad regular expressions. So these could be things like inefficient regex, whereby you potentially can get into some backtracking examples, but it could also be regex that's way too broad. So if you have a very open-ended capture expression, this could lead to a large number of false positives. When applying Cribl Guard, you want to test the logic for your rule sets before making them live within a production system. And one of the ways that Cribl Guard supports this is running in what's termed a highlight-only mode. Within the highlight-only mode, rather than modifying the logs or events as they're traversing through the pipeline, instead a label is applied to them. So that's the underscore sensitive equals true example. This means you could, for example, enable a set of rules, place them in highlight-only mode, and then potentially after a week, review the data within your analytical or storage systems and extract all of the cases in which Cribl Guard triggered. This then enables you to validate them and make modifications to the rules as required. The other topic that's important to talk about are false positives. As with all regex-based systems, there will be false positives. The more rules you enable, the higher number of false positives you will get. So the most important thing here is to ensure that you are applying rules that are well formatted and tailored towards the needs of your environment. And the question to ask is really, what regions, languages, and customers do you support? As an example, if I'm developing an application for medical customers within the United Kingdom, I might be interested in looking for UK National Health Service numbers. However, if I'm working in a European logistics firm with a division based out of Italy, it might be the case that searching for Italian driver's licenses that might have been inappropriately logged would be a better use of my time. The next thing to talk about is Cribl Guard pricing. This information is correct as of February 2026. The latest information is always available on our pricing page. Cribl Guard is available today for both customers running Cribl Cloud and also customers with a software license. In cloud, this is priced as a credits per gigabyte scanned, and for software, this is priced for a daily scan volume up to a specified volume per day. The full details are available here, cribl.io/pricing/stream. The advice that I would give to anyone using a cloud subscription is to only scan data fields you believe may contain sensitive data. I've mentioned earlier, as an example, it's unlikely that sensitive data will be placed within a timestamp, but user-created fields, so like free text fields in which a message could be generated, are a better field to scan with Cribl Guard. This will ensure that you're optimizing your credit spend to achieve the best business outcome possible. I hope you've found this presentation useful. If you'd like to get in touch, please do join us on the Cribl Community Slack channel in #EMEA. This is available at cribl-community.slack.com. We have a large list of docs available, which are continuously being updated with all of the newest Cribl features. And finally, keep an eye out for more Cribl University content coming later this year. There's lots of exciting things that we're keen to show you. And if you would like to get in touch with the customer success team, please reach out to us at success@cribl.io.